Can the Minnesota Vikings beat the Detroit Lions and take a stranglehold on the NFC North? It's going to be a really, really interesting game that honestly is probably going to be defined by injuries. There were a lot of interesting nuggets that came out today with the initial injury reports, and some potential Pro Bowl and All-Pro players could be missing Sunday's tilt. Plus, we're going to take a look at some of the efficiency metrics among both teams, with garbage time excluded, which is really important when talking about the Minnesota Vikings. Strap in. We're going to have some fun here on the Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Real Forno Show. I'm your host, Tyler Forness, and with me, as always, in the top, now I got to remember this, left corner, Dave. You know what? I'm getting real sick of you popping into different corners and me having to figure out which way to point. It's driving me nuts. But you know what? If that's the only thing that doing the show, I think we're doing something right. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are here. Dr. Proto might be 2 beers deeper. I just cracked numero uno, my nice Purple Daily koozie. We are going to have some fun here talking Minnesota Vikings. Tried to score a guest. Both of the guys that were Lions experts were unable to attend due to other professional commitments, which can't blame them. This is going to be a really interesting game.
They didn't want to hear how they're going to lose anyways.
You know what? They've heard that for decades upon decades.
You'd think they'd get used to it.
A little bit of smack. I'm okay with them talking a little bit of smack because they have dealt with it way more than we have. And they've been through the ringer. They've been through the gauntlet. And you know what? It's fine. It's fine. I am in the process of trying to figure out, hey, why am I blurry? If you think I'm blurry, throw it in the comments. Dave says I'm blurry on his end, so we're trying to figure it out. But
you're a little clearer now. I just killed one soldier down. Gary understands that. Gary, this game has you worried? Why?
Yeah, well, easy. The Lions are a very, very good football team. And it feels wrong to say it, right? The Lions are good. And I think we just need to understand and come to that that realization. The Lions are just good. And it's going to be tough. One of the interesting things about the Lions is they have continuity more than almost any other good team in the National Football League. The Vikings don't quite have that continuity yet, but they have it in certain spots, which has made a really big difference. We've talked extensively about the offensive line, how I disagree on people that say the interior is just really bad. You want it to be better, and that is 100% fine. But it's fine. Like, the interior is fine, especially when you look at the difficulty of assignment that they're being asked to do. If you want more information on that, please check out Monday's show and check out yesterday's special show with Pro Football Focus's Dalton Wasserman. You will get a lot more context about that. The nice part is those are relatively evergreen for the rest of the week, so you don't have to worry about being outdated on those topics. What's really interesting about looking at Vikings versus Lions is it's going to be a chess match between coordinators. So on the Lions side, offensive coordinator Ben Johnson is considered kind of not a prodigy like a Kyle Shanahan, but a very, very good and creative play caller that runs a lot of Shanahan-McVay style concepts and has really developed a knack for being creative and getting guys schemed open. Last year, Sam Laporta was being talked about as one of the best tight ends in football after year one, when in reality, he was what I call a Ben Johnson merchant. He was the recipient of Ben Johnson just scheming these bonkers wide open plays. Now, Laporta's still a good player, and in order to capitalize on some of that, you have to be good. But he's not this great tight end that everybody was kind of making him out to be, because the offensive coordinator was just making him, like, giving him everything on a silver platter. That just makes things so much easier to be able to accomplish. And he makes life easy for Jared Goff. They have a great offensive line. Frank Ragnow is one of the best centers in the National Football League. The Vikings were in on him. I can't remember which draft it was. It might have been 2018. I think it was 2018. But he ended up going to the Lions, I think, at 21st overall. And he's been great. He did partially tear his pectoral muscle earlier in the year. And he had a funny way of telling Dan Campbell he was fine. He goes up to him and, like, punches the wall and, like, has his, like, chest spring back. And it's like, I'm fine. I'm ready to go. And that was the end of that. So right now is really good. Penei Sewell is arguably, you could make a real argument he's the best tackle in football. He's certainly the best right tackle in football, with the only real competition being Lane Johnson. And then Taylor Decker on the other side is no slouch. He is essentially at the same, like, level as Brian O'Neill. So you have bookend tackles that are arguably the best in the National Football League as a duo, with the only two competitors being the Vikings and the Eagles when they have Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson. And then you have good guards. Like, this is just a really well-built offense. They have two really good running backs in, like, thunder and lightning. David Montgomery has been one of my favorite players for a long time. And Jahmyr Gibbs is a great explosive option out of the backfield that they can use in a lot of different facets. Wide receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think, is a little bit of a Ben Johnson merchant as well. I don't think he's nearly the receiver that people make him out to be, because, like, he's a slot guy, and he's only a slot guy. And they give him these different route concepts and different plays to be able to just scheme open really easily. You still have to win, and he gets credit for that. But I can't ask him to go, hey, go line up against Pat Surtain and beat his ass one-on-one on the outside. You're not asking Amon-Ra St. Brown to do that. Jameson Williams is still kind of a wild card. He has some explosive plays, but on a down-to-down consistency, we haven't seen it enough to really truly buy in that he was worthy of that 12th overall pick. But it doesn't mean it won't happen, and that's something to really be mindful of. And the narrative with Jameson Williams, it does not matter. It does not matter that the Vikings did not take him and that they traded back with the Lions. It does not matter. I don't want to hear it. If Lewis Cine hit, nobody would care. But you know what? He was a 32nd overall pick. That can miss. Shit happens. So we moved on. Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah has shown a growth in his process. He already hit on Jordan Addison. We believe he massively hit on J.J. McCarthy. Dallas Turner is still learning and growing, but he's flashed and has shown some potential. I think we just have a good general manager. And when you look at it outside of that, I talked about Laporta already. One of those guys gets injured, it can go downhill real fast because there's no depth at wide receiver. Running back, you have two guys, which is really important, but one of those guys that gets hurt, can the other one shoulder the load? I think David Montgomery can. I don't know if Jahmyr Gibbs can. He's never been asked to do that at the college level. He was always viewed as like a complementary piece, but the best piece in the room, but was never given a massive workload. So that's an interesting factor. And Johnson is going to go up against Brian Flores, Dave, where one interesting caveat about last year, the two games the Vikings played against the Lions were after that scheme they had last year, which is similar, but not identical, was found out. And they torched them. They peppered in deep in routes, deep digs, dagger over the middle of the field. And they attacked the flats. And, well, the flats are a lot easier to contain now because of how the Vikings are playing. They're not dropping Harrison Phillips into coverage. They're dropping Dallas Turner. They're dropping Andrew Van Ginkel. A little bit easier for those guys to get in the flats. So it's going to be interesting to see how he decides to attack this rendition of the Vikings defense, because they are playing differently. Differently is important here. We want different because what happened at the end of last year was a version of the defense that Brian Flores wanted to institute, but he wasn't able to fully accomplish. Why wasn't he able to fully accomplish it? He didn't have the dudes. And Dave, he has the dudes now. He has the dudes. And you know what? It feels great. It feels great and confident that we can really believe in what this defense is, who's calling it, and who's running it. And when they face the Lions, they're going to be facing a very good offensive unit. And then on the flip side, Kevin O'Connell is going to face Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator. And it's going to be real interesting to see how Glenn attacks his Vikings defense, especially if TJ Hawkinson plays, which is still up in the air. We'll get to some injuries in a little bit. What's really going to be interesting is how they're going to generate pass rush. They do have some really talented interior defenders. Aleem McNeil just signed a massive contract yesterday. 4 years, $97 million. That's just the price of doing business if you're a good defensive tackle in this league. Really unfortunate because I think the Vikings made a calculated bet last year. They did not get Jer'Jon Newton. They did not get Byron Murphy. They prioritized edge. And I think that's okay, with the idea being that they wanted to come this year and score a big named, high price free agent on the market. Dave, they're all gone. All of them. DeForest Buckner, extension. Derek Brown, extension. Kenny Clark, extension. Aleem McNeil, extension. All these guys that we thought might be free agents, they're all signed. So the Vikings are in a little, it's like a rock and a hard place. You can't keep sustaining, or you might be able to with Brian Flores, who knows. But theoretically, you can't keep sustaining this level of defensive play without really good players in the defensive line. You have Harrison Phillips locked up at a bargain of a contract, but you don't really have anybody you can count on next to him. You still don't know what you're going to get out of Levi Drake Rodriguez. Taki Taimani's played fine for a nose tackle. Will he be able to keep it up and keep developing into a capable starter? I don't know. I can't tell you for certain either way, but I'd have to lean no because he's a UDFA. That's kind of how you have to be cautiously optimistic with those guys because they were UDFAs for a reason. That doesn't mean they can't overcome that stigma and be great players, but you have to be careful by putting too much expectations on a player like that. So what are they going to do at defensive line long term? I don't know. But that bet is not looking as promising because long term they may be fine. If you draft a really talented guy in the first round next year. But Dave, just like with Dallas Turner, you can't count on that guy to give you meaningful snaps right away. That's not a good strategy. You should never count on your rookies to be starters and regular contributors until they've proven they should be. JJ McCarthy was proving that he should be the starter before he got hurt. That's different than I draft you, you're playing day one. Scottish Bear asked about, did the Bears hit on their starting quarterback? I don't know yet because the one problem with Caleb Williams, he does not like to play within structure. He likes to play like it's NFL Street. Run around and try and create something that's not there. In college, you can get away with that because spacing is just bonkers different. The caliber of athlete is different. So if you're a guy like Justin Jefferson playing in college, the amount of separation you can create is just bonkers because you're going up against lesser players. In the NFL, those spaces condense and they get tighter. And because they condense and get tighter, that all factors in to you not being able to do some of the things that you did in college at the same level. There is an adjustment period. So I genuinely don't know if Caleb Williams will be good. I think because he was the first overall pick and a lot of people really believe in him, I think you can say yes. He will be good. But he was a guy that was, hey, we drafted you. They named him the starter in like May. Like they didn't waste their time. They're like, you're the guy. And I think there's a benefit to that in some instances, like with a quarterback, you know he's going to be the guy. Just start treating him like the guy and let him just get all the warts out early. Some guys, as we talked about with McCarthy, some guys can mentally handle it, some guys can't. We as media cannot determine that because we don't spend every minute with them. We don't see them every single second of practice. We can get glimpses, we can get vibes, but I can't tell you that. I couldn't even tell you, like, working with Dave regularly for the past 4 years, I couldn't even tell you 100% if Dave had the mental fortitude for some things, because even though we work closely together, I'm not with him in a studio. I'm not doing these things side by side with him. We are across the country. There are things that you just cannot see unless you are there for everything. And to kind of wrap that all up in a bow, you don't want to count on first round picks to do anything for you in year one. You want to go in there and expect them, hey, you are going to be a backup all year until you earn your way onto the field. Justin Jefferson didn't even know how to run every route in the playbook until like week 8. Week 3, he finally got the start because BC Johnson was poopy. And guess what? He torched the Titans. And then the legend grew from there. But he didn't play much in weeks 1 and 2. And revisionist history can be like, oh, why didn't you play that much? He had a great rookie year. He wasn't ready. Everybody knew he wasn't ready. But they knew he was special. You can't force these things. And that is why you have to be really, really careful when you're having some of these conversations about, hey, we're just going to draft guys, slot them right then there, we're going to be great. You can't do that. You just can't. Interesting thing from Scottish Bear says he actually looks better under center than in the gun. That's fucking weird. I'm going to have to go back and look at some all-22 Scottish Bear. And I'm not saying you're wrong. Caleb Williams ran like nothing under center in college. Like maybe a few goal line snaps and like a quarterback sneak. That's it. So the fact that he might be better under center is so wild to me. But I'm going to be very interested to kind of get that information. So the reason why we're talking about defensive line is when you go up against an offensive line like the Detroit Lions have, you got to be prepared and you got to have dudes. Vikings don't have dudes on the defensive line, but they do have edge rushers. But how is that going to matter in the run game? And that's where I'm going to be really, really intrigued. I found this stat earlier today, Dave. Doing some research. So when I like to look at like advanced metrics, I like to take out garbage time because garbage time heavily impacts the way you play the game. I like to look at neutral situations. What is it when it's 7-3, middle of the second quarter? Like those kind of situations. Or even like, hey, 20-10 in the middle of the second quarter. Like that's still a completely open game. You're not going to be forced to only throw the ball. And I think that's an interesting kind of snapshot of a team to see how they work in neutral situations. So I took a look. The Lions have twice the EPA per play, double running the ball versus passing the ball in neutral situations. You know what that tells me? That tells me that offensive line and that running game is good. Not just good. Good. Real good. And it's like you could say, hey, like the Vikings, after 4 weeks, they had the most passing yards allowed in the National Football League. Well, when you're leading by 20 plus points in 3 of your 4 games, guess what, Dave? You're going to throw the football. That's why volume stats don't tell you the story. Jordan Love threw for almost 400 yards. 90 of it came in the final drive. And he had 55 attempts. And he was down by more than 20 points for a half an hour of game time. That matters. That matters when you're talking about volume stats. And that's what the Vikings were. They were great when it came down to the nitty-gritty. They were great when it came to efficiency. But at a certain point, if they throw 55 times, you're going to allow numbers. And that's why this is really interesting to kind of look at the Lions' run game. Neutral situations, they're just a dominant run team. They're first in EPA per play at 0.203. For context, the Vikings' overall EPA is 0.203. That's including running the football. Their passing EPA is 0.285. First in the National Football League. That's dropback EPA, excuse me. So passing the football. The Lions are 13th at 0.107. So they're around average when it comes to throwing the football in neutral situations. And I think that's really, really interesting that the running game has been that dominant. But I have not fact checked this yet, and I'm going to. Somebody told me that nobody in the NFC North, other than the Vikings, have beaten a team with a winning record.
I'm not so sure about that.
Winning record, not 500. Winning. And I think that's a caveat because the Vikings have beaten the Texans, who have a winning record. They've beaten the Packers, who have a winning record. But the 49ers are 500. The Giants are under 500. The Jets are under 500. Like I said, I've not had a chance to fact that. But like the Lions, the Seahawks are 500. The Cowboys are under 500. Like, they
that
haven't.
Would be crazy if that's the case. I have, let's see, Detroit Lions. They beat Dallas, obviously not above 500. Mm-hmm. They did beat Seattle.
500 team.
They beat Arizona.
Under 500.
Lost to Tampa.
They are over 500. And, they're 4-2.
And beat the Rams.
Under 500.
Okay. Interesting.
It is interesting, isn't it? I also don't think it matters at all because the Packers wins have been the Colts, Titans, Rams, and Cardinals. All those teams under 500. They lost to the Eagles. The Eagles, I think they're at 500 right now. I'm verifying real quick. Yeah, they're one game above 500 because they had a bye already. So they're 3-2. But it's very interesting the fact that the Vikings are the only team in the NFC North who's beaten a team with a winning record. Now it's 6 games in. 6 games is hard to have a winning record because one, it's an even number. 2, 3-3 is what the NFL wants. The NFL wants 500 football teams. The whole setup and structure of the league is for every team to be 500. Why? You win by making great decisions and you win in the margins. So the Vikings front office and coaching help you get there because everybody's on the same playing field. And I think that's what makes this game so great. But to kind of wrap this all up in a bow, because look, you guys know me. I can just talk in one rambling chain for 15 minutes and talk about 7 different things because I link them all together. But how Kevin O'Connell attacks his defense will be interesting. But most importantly, I'm really intrigued by this Vikings defense stopping the run. The number one key to this game will be stopping the run. If the Vikings can stop the run, I'm not going to say it's a guaranteed win, but you stop the run, you're going to be in a great spot. So let's take a look at some of the Vikings metrics. All right. Overall EPA per play allowed. They are first in the National Football League at negative 3.18 in neutral situations. Rush EPA, they're second in the league at negative 3.349 EPA allowed per play. Running game success rate allowed, fifth in the league at 33.3%. Only 1 out of every 3 rush plays is successful. And overall success rate, they're first in the league at 34.6% of plays successful. And they're also first in dropback success rate, despite having facing more passes than any team in the National Football League so far this year. First, 35.2% dropback success rate. That's some pretty damn good efficiency. For comparison, the Lions are 20th, 47.7%. Really, really interesting. Let's get to a couple questions because we've seen some good ones. Gary, I'm going to answer this question, but I'm going to need you to tell me about your pizza. You have not commented in here lately about what kind of pizza you've been making, so I want to hear about your latest one. Asked who wins a turnover battle. What are you predicting? That's a really, really good question. The Lions, to my knowledge, are really, really good when it comes to forcing turnovers. I'm going to kind of look that up right now, but the Lions are aggressive. Brian Branch, who you guys know, I loved Brian Branch last year. I wanted Brian Branch to be the Vikings pick in 2023. I wanted him over Jordan Addison. And They didn't make it happen, which is fine. Which is completely fine. I understand. But he's really good. Through 5 games, the Lions have forced 10 turnovers. The Vikings have forced 13. The Packers in 6 are number 1 in the league at 17 turnovers forced. That's that new safety duo that they have in Green Bay. They're legit. They're real good, Dave. And we saw that. Xavier McKinney had an interception in the first 5 games of the National Football League season. I think he's the first player ever to do that when playing for a new team. So, who wins the turnover battle? I don't know. But if the Vikings are even, don't even strive to win it. Like, that should be your goal. I like to have 3 goals. An incredibly easy goal, a one that's attainable, and one that's absurd. Having those 3 levels, you'll always get some kind of accomplishment. One, like your small goal, hey, score a touchdown in the first quarter. Pretty easy goal, easily attainable. Goal 2, win the turnover battle. Okay. Goal 3, win the turnover battle by like 2+ and don't turn it over yourself. Have multiple levels of goals. Why you want to have multiple levels of goals? You're never going to be a total and adjunct failure if you have multiple levels. I do that. Dave and I have talked about it as far as growing our platform before. Growing Vikings First and SKOL, which, like, subscribe, ring the bell. This is our 5th show in 3 days. Ooh, Traeger meals. Ooh. You got to tell me more, Gary. You got to tell me more. You got to tell me more. That sounds phenomenal. I love Traeger meals. Anyways, you want to have multiple levels of goals. And I think with the turnover battle, the Vikings can do that. And as long as they're even, I think Kevin O'Connell is 20-0 if he does not lose the turnover battle?
21, I think it is.
It's 21 now? Okay. Just don't lose the turnover battle. I don't think the Vikings will lose the turnover battle, but I'm not going to tell you they win. Sarah, yes, I did mention we are number 2 in forcing turnovers, but we've also turned the ball over. So we've had a couple games this year where we've been even and we've won them. But we've only won, I think, 3 or 4 games when we've lost the turnover battle. Connor says that where did it go? It just scrolled up. Darnold will implode. He can't sustain this level of play. I'm trying to think of how to explain this. I think he can sustain what he's doing because it's not like Darnold is playing like lights out MVP caliber football. His decision making and his process is very sustainable. His interception against the Jets was not from a bad decision. Could he have made a better decision? Yeah. He didn't make a bad one. He just airmailed the throw a little bit, and some of that had to do with the field. The field was garbage. Dave, it was like the field was a Miller Lite.
Hey, it's good enough in a pinch.
I'm going to be honest.
Hey there, Rap.
So his process is good, and he's getting some good results. Now, are the results going to be as good consistently? Is he going to throw 11 touchdowns to 3 interceptions every month? No. Touchdowns themselves are a variable metric. Why? Why do they have such high variance? Just look at Calvin Johnson. Remember the year he had 1,936 yards? Dave, he had 4 touchdowns. He got tackled inside the 5 6 times. Touchdowns are high variance. You want to look at team touchdowns. How often will the team score? I think that's really important. Connor responds, a big game like this will tell you a lot. Connor, I have news for you, my friend. Sam Darnold's already had 4 big games. You beat the 49ers, reigning Super Bowl runner-up. You beat the Houston Texans, a popular pick to win the Super Bowl. They were my pick to win the Super Bowl. You didn't just beat them. You beat the piss out of them. You took them behind the woodshed, and you walloped them. And then you did the same to the Green Bay Packers. Yeah, the Packers came back. You kicked their ass. And then they beat the New York Jets after getting up 13-0. Sorry, 17-0. All right, Gary's Traeger. All right. Buttered chicken legs, marinated dry for 48 hours, mac and cheese with collard greens. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. I have chicken legs. I did pull a rack of spare ribs. I'm going to do a rack of spare ribs this weekend. No sauce. If you need to do sauce on ribs, it's one of 2 things. 1, you just love sauce. Or 2, you don't have taste buds. You don't need sauce. If you've got enough seasoning, you don't need sauce. Like that's
you know how to smoke it properly.
Mm-hmm.
While I was in Baghdad, VBC, all the chow halls had smokers, and I think it was Thursday, we had ribs, and you'd smell it across the base because they had these things are massive, and they're on a rotary type deal. And you go through the chow hall, and you'd get however many ribs you wanted sliced up, and they had no sauce. You could add sauce, and they had a variety of sauces from your typical Kansas City style to a vinegar-based, North Carolina style or whatever it was. They had sauces, but they were so good, you did not need to eat them with any sauce because the smoke was just right.
Ooh, I just want ribs now. The wife is bringing home bread because we've got some killer turkey lunch meat that we got at the grocery store, and I'm gonna get some bacon. I might have 6 or 7 slices of bacon on my sandwich tonight. Why? Because this is America, and I can. I can because Dave ate ribs over in Baghdad, which let's also be honest, brave thing to do, eating ribs over in Baghdad.
Hey, that is what it is. We ate bacon in Afghanistan too.
I should ask my best friend about that. I think I've told you this, Dave. My best friend was an MP, and he spent a year in Kandahar. He also got to live in Grafenwald, Germany for 3 years. So, that was that he loved that. That was cool. All right, couple more things.
Jared's right about the crowd being loud as all get out, and Goff is going to try to figure out. It's going to have a hard time trying to figure out what our defense is doing.
Mm-hmm. So here's an interesting thing about the crowd. Dave, did you know that the Vikings have 9 false start penalties this year? 5 of them are Blake Brandel.
Wow.
Yeah, can you believe that? That doesn't feel right, does it?
Mm-mm.
So they've had a lot of pre-snap penalties. They've had 3 official delay of games by Sam Darnold. So they have 12 pre-snap penalties already. And these false starts aren't just happening on the road. They're happening at home. So it's interesting. Like Wes Phillips had some interesting comments about the pre-snap penalties. And they're like, I think they're happening more across the league this year. What he said is the cadence. They're still adjusting to Darnold's cadence. He's like, look, it's not an excuse, but we practice 6 different cadences because you don't want the defense to really catch on to one cadence, which I'm going to be honest, I feel like I've caught on to Aaron Rodgers' cadence for the last decade, and I feel like other people should have too, but maybe there's some nuance that I'm missing listening on the TV copy versus being there in person. And especially on the field. But not having the continuity. Like with Kirk, it was a lot easier. You had a lot less pre-snap penalties because everybody was so used to Kirk. But you have a brand new quarterback, a brand new voice, a brand new diction, brand new tone. Like everything's different. So they're getting adjusted to that. And he's like, it's not an excuse. It's just reality. Like they're taking the time to really get that cadence. And they're having some issues. So that was addressed. But there were also more false start penalties kind of across the league, which is really interesting to kind of parse out on. I haven't done the deep dive to see how many false start penalties have happened just in US Bank Stadium. I probably could. But this crowd, as you said, somebody mentioned in the chat that this US Bank Stadium crowd is going to be a major factor. They're going to be bonkers. This is the biggest Vikings-Lions game maybe ever. And I was talking to Judd about this on Purple Daily Meat and Potatoes, where go check that out. That we did a lot of really fun stuff breaking down the episode. More offensive line talk there too. But we talked a lot about how this is the biggest Lions game in recent memory. Dave, was there ever a time where you were more excited about facing the Lions in your life?
No.
Maybe a Thanksgiving Day game?
Well, that would be it. But, and those, how many times have we faced them on Thanksgiving? It's got to be only a handful, if that.
Yeah.
So, but no. The Lions have, not since the 70s, have they had been consistently where you consider them good. There was times when, but they had Barry Sanders that was interesting, and those ones were must watch because Barry was must watch TV, just the way he ran. But for the most part, even with Calvin Johnson, yeah, they were fun to watch, but it wasn't this important, nor was it in this demand. We talked about it earlier on Who Will Be King, the NFC North Roundup show for Fans First Sports Network, that everybody wondered, well, Pay from the Bear Claw podcast wondered why this wasn't moved to more of a national game. We did look up, or had look up right after the fact, the national broadcast. Most of Fox is broadcasting this game in the noon slot. It's most of the country is getting it, including Austin, thankfully. We're not even getting Dallas. The local Austin Fox channel said, heck with the Cowboys. We're showing Vikings Lions. And which is great because usually I get that. The other channel, CBS, is doing the Houston game, but who's going to watch it? Houston and Green Bay. No, not when the Vikings Lions game's on. They're going to be watching Vikings Lions. So,
yeah.
You got the two best teams in the NFC. Literally.
Oh, yeah.
The two best teams in the NFC. They have a point differential. Vikings are plus 63. The Lions are plus 60. 3 points. The Vikings are undefeated. The Lions have one loss, right? Whoever wins this is going to be number one in the NFC. Right now, it's the Vikings, right? And if the Vikings win, they virtually hold a 3-game lead on the Lions and the Packers due to tiebreakers. They will own those tiebreakers. So it'll be a 2-game, but it'll be virtually. And at least 3 on the Packers. The only one that we don't have the tiebreaker on yet, because we haven't played them, is Chicago. Scottish Bear fans, that will be coming. Don't worry. But this is an important game because the next time we see them is week 18. And if they come down and they're 1-2 in the NFC and for the division, this game's going to be probably the last game played in week 18 because it's going to be for all the marbles. Who's going to get the position in the playoffs? But that's way down the line. They first have to get through Sunday. And this Sunday is probably the most important game of week 7 and of the season so far.
The only other game, Dave, that I could think of that I was maybe more excited about was 2000. It was a Thursday night game. And you may remember it. Chris Carter caught his 1,000th pass.
Yeah, but that wasn't because of the Lions. That was because of
no,
Chris.
but it was but that's part of the point, right? Mm-hmm. It was the most excited I've been for a Vikings-Lions game in pretty much my entire life. Was because Chris Carter was about to catch number 1,000. And he did so in the end zone in a way that only Chris Carter could, extending out away from his body and using great hands to catch it. It was awesome. But yeah, this Lions team has been so bad. I was also talking to Judd. I remember when Barry broke 2,000. 1997, week 17 against the New York Jets. Jumbo Elliott accidentally sat on Reggie Brown's head and broke his neck. Nearly paralyzed him for life, but he ended up regaining the use of all of his limbs. And then later on in that game, Barry Sanders broke 2,000. It was a very, very odd game from that standpoint because you had massive tragedy and incredible triumph all in once. You don't get a lot of situations like that. But this Lions team is finally good. And this Vikings team is good. And what's interesting about this Vikings team, Dave, the last 4 times the Vikings have made the NFC Championship game, they went into the season without super high expectations. Now, you could argue 2017, they had high expectations, but they were also dealing with, hey, they were 1 year away from going 8-8 with Sam Bradford. Is this really the team that's going to be able to do that? Well, they end up doing it. 2000, Dante Culpepper. Oh, you got a guy who's never started a football game before as your quarterback. How are you going to be able to do it? That team was arguably better than 98. They were more complete. Guys on that team have come out publicly and said so. So 98, they were supposed to finish like 3rd or 4th in the division. And they nearly won the entire thing. Like 09 was like, hey, we're hoping for Brett Favre. We're hoping for Brett Favre. Going into the season, it was like, well, if Brett Favre doesn't show up, this team might be okay. Well, then he showed up and they had the massive run that they were. And this team did not have high expectations. They had no expectations. And look at them now. I'm really excited about what this Vikings team could possibly be. I am excited for how this Vikings team could end up making a run. And if they want to make a run, you got to win a game like this. Look, you're not going to win every game that you face a really, really good opponent, but this is the one you need to win. Remember, this Vikings team has a process, and they've talked about, we want to go 1-0. You got to go 1-0 on Sunday. You got to look at the Lions, tell them to piss off, and you got to beat their ass. No ifs, ands, or buts. No sugarcoating. Beat their ass. Because it's going to be a physical game. There's a reason why Dan Campbell talks about grit and talks about like winning the line of scrimmage. And they have really shaped their team around that with the defensive line and with the offensive line as well. They're going to beat the piss out of you. You better be ready for a counterpunch. Mike Tyson always talked about everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, when you get punched in the mouth, you better be freaking ready. And I think this team will be. I think they have the guys to do it. I think they have the coordinators to do it. I also think, Dave, they have the talent. They have the talent to beat this team. They have the skill to beat this team. They have the scheme to beat this team. And I think the Vikings will end up winning this football game. But the one thing that we have to talk about that we haven't talked about yet, injuries are going to play a major factor. For the Lions, unfortunately for the Lions, they're going to be without Aidan Hutchinson. That's an incredible benefit for the Minnesota Vikings. Aidan Hutchinson is their only good edge rusher. Marcus Davenport out for the year with a torn triceps. After that, they don't really have a lot. And I think that's really important to note. The Vikings are going to be able to kind of take advantage of some of those things. Now, there are some guys that didn't practice. Cornerback Carlton Davis as a quad, he didn't practice. Offensive tackle Dan Skipper, who's been like their quasi tight end, did not practice. Kevin Zeitler, offensive guard, and center Frank Ragnow both did not practice, but they did not practice for rest. Brian Branch, the star defensive back we talked about, was limited. So there are guys that they need to be worried about. But it's more on the Viking side of the football. Blake Cashman probably won't play. That came from Andrew Kramer from the Star Tribune earlier today. He had their report, and then Kevin O'Connell both confirmed and rebutted the report, saying that, hey, he's day-to-day, week-to-week. We don't know if he's going to end up coming and playing on Sunday. We just don't know. I think they're hopeful that he's going to practice this week and then go from there. As you can see Cheddar in the background. Say hi, Cheddar. Come here, bud. No? Okay. I think he's camera shy. His tail's not. You can see it wagging. Hey, buddy. But it's not just Cashman. Aaron Jones. Dave, it's now a hamstring injury. And there was some confusion. Like, well, why is it a hamstring? It was a hip. Well, I don't know how much you know about orthopedics, but hip and hamstring are very close to each other. So that was part of it. There's Cheddar. Hey, buddy.
No, I'd read most likely they called it a hip. It's because he's got basically tendonitis where the hamstring tendon comes and attaches to the hip. There's a specific term for it. I'd have to look it up again, but it flares up. And it tightens up, like you said. So as long as it's not torn, it's keep it from inflaming up deal. He's fine. But if it starts to tighten up and get inflammation in there, that's when you got to pull him, or it's in danger of tearing. So we'll see how it goes.
Cheddar is going to try and sit in my lap. He is a 46-pound lab pity greyhound mix. He's small for what he is, but he's not small like volume wise. So
he's a lap dog.
Well, he's trying to be. Aaron Jones, he did not practice. Harrison Phillips and Pat Jones didn't practice either, both with shoulder injuries. That was interesting and unexpected. How much of it is just veteran rest, but they do have an actual injury. We're going to find out later this week. Caleb Evans got injured. He injured his hip the same game as Aaron Jones. He didn't practice. He's played 3 defensive snaps all year, and they have guys that they can play on special teams to kind of compensate for his loss. TJ Hawkins and Dalton Reisner were limited with their injuries. They have their practice windows opened. If either one of them is full on Friday, they may be activated for this weekend. That's something to keep an eye on. Theo Jackson had a hand. He was full. I think he's been on the injury report before. Had no issues. Josh Oliver's been on the injury report for multiple weeks with his wrist. He hasn't missed any time. He's missed like a little bit of practice time, but nothing crazy. So the Vikings do have some injuries to worry about. And if they can't end up if they're going to have some of those guys out, that's going to be an issue, because especially Blake Cashman, they're going to have to do a lot to mitigate the loss of Blake Cashman. Cheddar's a little down in the dumps. You can see his head droop because Blake Cashman might not play on Sunday.
Yeah, but the deal with Cashman is they have Camus Grugier Hill that can come in and step in. Plus we have Ivan Pace. Last year, all we had was Ivan Pace. And they can move 5 backs into, playing that position. Metellus, whomever else they want to move down into the box like they did last year. And we almost beat the Lions last year in both games.
Nice.
Yeah. And we have better edge rushers this year. So I'm not as worried about Cashman being out. I'd love for him to be there. But it's all against, and I think our interior line, headed up by Harrison Phillips, is playing better against the run, and how they're scheming it against the run, because I think stopping the run is the key to this game. So it is what it is. I don't think we're going to see Cashman. The report is turf toe. Turf toe can be something that ends you up on IR.
Now, I will say, Kevin O'Connell did straight up say they don't expect it to be an injury that lands him on IR.
Right.
So I think that's important, where they were very explicit in saying so. But you just never know. You never know. Right, Cheddar?
Yeah. So hopefully it's just day-to-day, as Sarah said. I agree.
But we'll see. If he practices this week at all, I think that maybe there's a chance he can play. But the Vikings are being very vague about him. And honestly, they should be vague because it's turf toe. You want to be vague with turf toe because turf toe, it's essentially a jammed toe, which does not sound... Cheddar, you're going to have to get down, buddy.
It's essentially a sprained toe.
Yeah. Sorry, Cheddar. You were getting in the way. Yeah, it's the sprained toe, jammed toe. It's kind of one and the same, but that could take a long time to heal up. And sometimes turf toe requires surgery.
Right.
But we're not jumping to any of those conclusions yet. It's just important to know.
Broken Tubing said, almost. You're hanging your hat on almost. You got to remember last year we're with backup quarterbacks and a lesser defense, and it was almost.
Yeah. But look, guys, get really excited for this game. We're going to have a London game. Scottish Bears going to be watching that one for sure as the Bears take on the Jaguars in London. No, that was last weekend.
That was last week.
The Bears Patriots Jaguars this weekend. So
last week with the Bears beating the Jags was Caleb Williams, one of his best games ever.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Stats don't count against the Jaguars because they're bad.
When do we play the Jags? Week 10.
Yeah. Look, get excited. Get excited. This is going to be one of the biggest games that we've had in a long time as fans of the Minnesota Vikings, and the Vikings have a great chance to win. Be excited.
They do.
That is going to be our show. We're going to have
a lot if you're at the game.
Yes. Get loud, smoke some ribs, and have fun. These are the games that you want as a fan. You want your team to be in a great spot to win. You want your team to be in big games. It's a big game. Both sides are going to be ready to go. This week, go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
Well, I was just... Demond Dice says Bears had the Lions on the ropes, 26-31 at Ford Field, and then smashed the Lions 28-13 at home. Bears don't fear the Lions.
All right. Paul, I hope you're right. I hope the Vikings do get to 6-0. I think they probably will. I think they're slight favorites. I think it's 1.5 or 2 points, which is kind of within the margins. Basically, I think this is an even game on a neutral field. When you look at some of those advanced metrics that I talked about earlier, EPA per play, success rate, the Vikings are either on par or smoking the Lions in most of them. The only spot where the Lions are better, rush EPA, which the Vikings are 20th in rush EPA, but they're 7th in success rate. Montgomery is very good. So that's kind of where we're at. In the meantime, thank you guys so much for listening. We're going to have more this weekend. There's going to be another, I believe, Scolders and Spice either Thursday or Friday. There's going to be two old bloggers. Wait, hold on. Is it going to be two old bloggers or one old blogger?
Supposed to be two.
Well, we've heard that before. Dave.
Darren says Darren is back home in Yellowknife, finally. And he says he will be here Saturday. For two old bloggers.
Good. And then we'll be here live at the 2-minute warning. Well, Dave will be. I will be once the game is done and I get my first post-game column post, which is usually like 5 minutes after the game ends. And we may have a larger crew for that. We'll find out day of. And if Darren's there, he's going to have some fun with me, let me tell you. Look, we're going to have a lot of great stuff here on the Real Forno Show. Cheddar might be there. Excuse the mess in my room, but Cheddar is now... he's not the pants. He's right there. He's sleeping on his bed. I need to clean my office. I probably shouldn't have shown such a dirty office, but whatever. We're going to have some fun, and you can catch all my written work on A to Z Sports and get excited. You want your team to play in big games, and the Vikings are going to do that. With that, thank you for joining us here tonight. Still 100 of you here. That freaking rules. We're grateful for you. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, because every now and then we're going to have a bonus episode, and a bonus episode rocks. I'm Tyler.
Right.
It's Dave. Cheddar's asleep. SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching the Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone.